thing up before it falls on my face.
Here we go.
Okay, I just got to get on this thing.
All right, we should be live now.
Oh, okay. Shit, okay. Oh, anyway. Let's see if it notifies me. All right, no one's on yet. I'll be right back. One of these things has a bar bottle of a bottle opener.
Oh, really? Now there's one person watching. I think. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that would have been a tragedy right there.
Hmm.
My own stupid fall. That's called that's a rookie mistake, Mayor. I'm not gonna lie to you. That's a rookie mistake I made right there.
You should know. How many times have you had ABC? But you should know that they have bar caps.
Okay, as I said, May, I wasn't thinking. Okay, so leave me alone. Anyway, yeah. So, all right, I'm ready to go now. So when you were ready, I'm ready.
Yep, we're live right now. So.
Oh, okay, that was exciting.
Well, I told you that before you.
Oh, well, I had myself an emergency, Mary. Here's what it is. So what's happening?
Hi, Barbara. Hi, David.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Barbara. Hi, David. What's going on? This is 4 on my end. What that means. Anyway, okay. So what's happening? What's going on?
Well, Happy New Year to everyone.
Happy New Year. Yeah, Happy New Year. New Year.
Ben is on here from Texas. He just said he enjoyed all the Gettysburg pictures.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, we had a lot of fun. We got out and about. We traveled around quite a bit. Now we're back. We were supposed to stay in Gettysburg until today, but the snow has had other plans, so we came back a day early. So,
yeah, that's fine with me. It's an extra day of vacation.
Yeah,
David, a beer emergency.
Yeah, absolutely was. So, yeah, so it's good to get back in the things again. And Christmas is over. The holidays are over, and walking town this morning here in Plymouth, we saw a lot of them taking down the decorations. So Christmas is sadly over. Yep. So anyway, off to bigger things.
Good morning, Gentili. Good morning, Scott.
Our consigliere's on, John Gentili. I'm sure we'll talk about that. We had the adventures with Johnny Boy this weekend. That was a lot of fun.
And I want to go back to Fairfax because that was so cool seeing all that Mosby stuff, especially the house where he smacked Stoughton.
Oh, the Gunnell House. Yeah. Fairfax. I mean, I've gone through there and never had the in-depth tour that John gave us. Now that's a cool little place though. And I know there's some good breweries around there and stuff like that, but there's also a lot of good history that we didn't get to see. So there's more stuff because you can't do everything, in one time. So we'll go back.
I would love to go on one of those all-day Mosby tours. I think that would be so cool.
How would they know if you were there? Because they wouldn't see you because you're a Mosby tour. Actually, they probably see your empty Labatt's blue cans everywhere. Mary was here. Somewhere the ghost of Phil Sheridan will be shaking his head.
I wouldn't write Mosby above the fireplace. It would be her.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? Yeah, that's coming into that quiet time. Not a lot of battles going on. Anniversary of Stones River was the other day. And then I didn't see a lot about. I didn't see too much about that at all on social media.
No, admittedly, I wasn't on looking at stuff because we were out on a lot of hikes and hanging out with people and all that, but I didn't really notice anything much about Stones River. It could also be because the battles fought New Year's Eve and January 1st, 1862, 1863. So that could have been why. But this year, this year, I guess, no, it wouldn't have been the 160th was last year.
I wonder if in Murfreesboro, they rose a big Lincoln hat in New Year's. And they had they had some karaoke. Anybody who was in Gettysburg on New Year's Eve.
That karaoke was bad.
I mean, look, and I love the town of Gettysburg and, support all their endeavors, everything they do. But having a live karaoke stage event in Town Square on New Year's Eve after 9 p.m., it was bad. I mean, was it weird seeing John Gentili singing It's Raining Men? That was weird. I'm not going to lie to you. That was a bingo card thing. I do not think I'd check off. But you know what, though? He did it, and I'm happy he did it because it shows that he's comfortable in his own skin. So congratulations, John Gentili. But that was a good time, though. We had a lot of fun with that. I think if the weather was kind of sketchy, so it kept a lot of people down. But I thought it was cool. It was different. Why not?
No, it was a great time. We had we're hanging out with friends. Some of the people on here we were hanging out with, which is pretty cool. So it was a great time. Like it was good. It was cool to be in Gettysburg for New Year's and all that. But just like right after midnight, the square cleared out. I think like everyone like in our group was in bed probably by like 12:30.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, it's so bad.
I
I
was
mean,
like, that had been all day. Like,
well, I'm not gonna lie. I've not seen midnight and New Year's in a long time.
same.
Usually, it's like the hell with this. The town I used to live in, they counted down to 12 at 10 p.m. and everybody pretended it was midnight and we went home. That's how cool that place is.
Wow,
But
that
yeah, but it
sounds
was
like
good.
something
It
daughter
was
should
good to
do.
be out. And it's people like we talk about this quite a bit, but people like to talk about going to battlefields at the time of the battle, experience what the
Mhm.
soldiers experience and stuff like that. But at a place like a Gettysburg, for example, or any of them, uh, you can't get to the places in the summertime unless you
Yeah,
really don't worry or care about ticks or
yeah,
snakes or clown attacks, any of those things, right? But when you go to a place in the wintertime and you can see through, we got to walk in a lot of cool things that normally we wouldn't have really been able to see.
yeah.
We did the March of the First Texas, which, despite what people on social media seem to think, it's not
Oh,
a
the 250,000. Yeah, I'm sure there have been 250,000 tourists go through that area.
right. But I mean, it's like that is we walked through the Rosewoods, through the Rose Farm, and then cut over and then worked our way to the triangular field. And
Yeah.
if you've walked that ground, then bravo to you, because with rocks and all the stuff that's hidden in there, I don't think you could do it in the summertime. And it gives you a different appreciation for those Texans, right?
Yeah.
In Robertson's brigade to actually do that because and you're under fire, getting shot and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We tried to find the William Barbie rock, and we think maybe that we might have found it, but there's no way to tell.
Yeah.
It was but I think for the most part, I think it was it's really a cool place to go out and walk, and go to places you normally couldn't do. So for the
Yeah.
people who want to get out and see some stuff, especially in that battlefield, it's a great time to go. We did get some intel that that Round Top is going to open for the anniversary this year.
Yeah.
So, and that's to be determined, but we had it from a pretty good source that that's the case. So we'll take that with a grain of salt. But I think he might be right considering who he is. So we will go from there.
Yeah. No, it was really cool. It was really cool to see that, like just walk in the steps that we did, including the cult. We did like a 7 mile Culp's Hill hike as well, which was good. Um,
And one of us didn't complain the whole time.
I never complained. Gentilly said the Christmas miracle was that no Fincher karaoke at Surratt's.
Oh my God. That would have been
actually
the
a
worst
blessing.
thing. That would have been the worst thing that's ever happened in that Surratt house if you sang in all of its history. Not going to lie to you. It would have been bad.
Well, it was like, I mean, when I saw that it was like a sushi place, and of course you two thought I was crazy getting sushi in that place, but then I'm like, I could see the guy making sushi, and I'm like, I'm getting sushi. This is like fresh. Like my
Yeah,
favorite
well,
thing.
you enjoyed it. We had a good time in Washington D.C. around Christmas time.
Yeah.
Is gorgeous. Most big cities, New York City, Boston, Washington, Chicago, around Christmas time are great.
Yeah.
So if you live near a big city, I would definitely check that out.
Yeah. Oh, Ben says always appreciate those Texans.
Yeah. Well, you can always tell a Texan, Ben, but you can't tell them anything. Well, it's funny because when you look, it's funny when you go to those battlefields and you get out and you really walk the ground. And I'm talking about getting your ass out of the car and actually walking the grounds, not just walking around Top or Devil's Den or Maurice Heights or places, the primary parts, but walking in like the true bowels of the battlefield of some of these footsteps. And in all seriousness, those guys in Works Regiment, walking through that field with the grass and the rocks everywhere. And what's great about it, if anybody, I'll bet you, I'm going to get you, a lot of people haven't made that walk because it's just a tough walk. If you walk through the triangular field in the path of the First Texans, you can see exactly what they talked about. Because first of all, you will get the greatest view of Devil's Den and Round Top by far.
But then you walk down, you see it, and then you walk down, and I didn't realize how sloped it was. And then there was a point where I couldn't even see Devil's Den or Little Round Top.
For most of the walk, it looks like one big hill. It would if you're one of these guys, one of these First Texan guys, you're walking down that field and you're looking straight ahead, and you see you see Smith's Battery, you see the 124th New York right on that wall. And then above that, you're going to see the men on a little round top. It looks like one big hill with multiple layers. Can you imagine being a Texan? You get to that triangle, you start to work yourself up, and you realize that there's a valley between the two, and you got to, oh my God, you got to deal with that again. And that's what's great about walking the ground, is because on paper, a lot of it's just flat ground. But when you want to put yourself in the true soldier foot of their shoes of these guys, walk Iverson's pits, walk through the wilderness, walk through Pickett's Charge, because it has undulations, Mary, right?
Rolling hills.
No, I haven't used that in a while. But you can really get a good idea. So when you talk about, Jimmy Kemper's guys being up and lying in this little field and not being seen, like, how the hell can they not be seen? They're right in the middle of the field, because they started pushed up. Then you walk that ground, you realize, okay, they were in a little swale. Yeah. And it all makes sense. But it's great to be able to walk that ground, because not everyone does. But if you are going to walk that first Texas, you got to want it. I mean, you're going to get halfway there, and you're going to realize it sucks, even in the winter time.
You get halfway there, and there's no going back. And then when you realize that,
there was some
stream. There's no going back.
There was some vintage Canadian wine being heard on that field at one point.
All I said was, I cannot jump this. Okay, yeah, but I was like, I didn't want to fall in the fucking stream. But then now, next time, I would just take my boots and my socks off and just walk across.
So there was there was a stream, and one of us was able to jump and one of us couldn't, and one of us had to walk parallel to it until she could find her crossing, and that was an adventure. I had to listen to it the whole way.
There was lots of thorns. I'm still picking burrs out of my mittens.
Yeah.
And it was like my legs got cut from the thorns as well, because I just had these cotton leggings on, and not I should have worn jeans. And but it was fun though.
Oh, I mean, of course
it is. I had to walk across, the way I got across the stream was there was these branches in the water. And of course, as I'm walking across, one of them starts to break because they've been in there for a while. And then I just was like, okay, I could potentially fall in, which at that point I was like,
I had Facebook Live ready to go in case you fell in that thing. That would have been a great moment for everybody right there. But it's cool because, if you know the story of the first Texas, you know about William J. Barbie, right? And he's one of the rocks, they're walking down, and he's shooting at the Orange Blossom Regiment, the Augusta Van Hellas guys up on that hill, and he's up there shooting, and he gets shot in the leg, and he falls off, and he climbs his ass back up on the rock again, and all those Texans are hurrah, hurrah, and they're throwing him guns as he's shooting. He gets shot in the leg again. He falls off again, climbs back up a third time, and he's still shooting. He finally gets shot in the chest, gets knocked off, but he survives. But one of those rocks is the rock he stood on. And we were trying to find, there's obviously no marker, but I think we have a pretty good idea of which one it was based on how high it would have to climb back up. But you can't get out there unless you walk out there, obviously.
No.
You can see the rocks that Van Horn Ellis and Lieutenant Colonel Cromwell would have going down on the horses. And imagine riding the horses down to that triangular field. And until you walk that ground, I mean, I would suggest doing it. But if you're going to do it, you absolutely cannot do it in the summertime unless you've got some brass ones.
There is no way.
Because there's snakes down there. There's rattlesnakes down there.
One of us doesn't have an issue with snakes, but the other one.
Well, I do, but I know enough to avoid the rocks. So we walked around, but I didn't say anything, but I was on snake watch the whole time. But that was cool about going.
I'm not honestly not scared of snakes.
Of rattlesnake?
I mean, yeah, I would, I guess a little, but I'd keep my distance from it.
If there's a group of us and there's a rattlesnake scene, that's when we're going to unload the Darren and Children First evacuation plan. Because you're gonna hear Gentilly scream that night. No way. But that's what's great about going to any of these battlefields in the wintertime is you can really walk it. You can walk the ground. So if you have the chance to do it, I mean, Fredericksburg and Stones River, there's a few of them that you're blessed by being able to go in the winter and being at the real time. But the big ones, Chickamauga, Gettysburg, and Antietam, the real ones that are kind of were fought when it wasn't cold.
And Chickamauga, even that is it's way more dense than what Gettysburg is. That's the one thing I've noticed between the two places. And I've only been to Chickamauga in late March, April, and that's when like the foliage is starting to come out. I couldn't imagine in the summer and even in September, like, where Longstreet was throwing up his assaults at Thomas and Snodgrass Hill, like that, there's like tree branches, like roots and all this other stuff. And I don't know how they managed to make it. Like, I mean, they probably kept tripping and falling. Bill said that last November he walked in the swale Barksdale's men attacked and first Minnesota charged.
Yep. No, that's
I
another
think
one.
we've done that one before
No,
too,
we
right?
did that a couple of years ago, but that's another good one too. When you can get a good idea of where Barksdale was likely wounded. There's no marker, no one really knows, but you can get a good idea of roughly based on the stories where he was. But
yeah,
that's what's great about it. And you can walk almost everywhere without any fear of anything. Summertime's tough. We walked down to Rock Creek. We kind of did the George Maryland Stewart retreat from Culp's Hill back towards McAllister's Ford. We ended up getting there the other way a couple of days later, but just to walk that ground and realize how rocky and tough it is. And this is just Gettysburg. I mean, there's all these battlefields are like this. I know we talk a lot about Gettysburg, but we were just there, so that's what we're going to talk about it. But that's the thing about it is you don't realize just the plight of these poor bastards doing this stuff on both sides. But
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's like the ground is really rough, especially when you get into the woods. And there's some areas that are kind of creepy. Like we were in the Rosewoods the other day. That was really creepy. We were on what you call Mass Ave, which was that place was like that's angry. That place, I call it the angry place.
No, when you're talking about those parts of the battlefields, and it's funny because we've heard a couple different people talk about. We're talking about the Sixth Corps, talking about the third division, the Sixth Corps, and there's an area there where the Sedgwick statue is, right? We call it Mass Ave. That's where the 7th Massachusetts was, the 10th Massachusetts, the 37th in Massachusetts, and 2nd Rhode Island. That's the 2nd Rhode Island. That's for Ben Frail if he's on here. But you have three Massachusetts regiments all along that place, and when you go there, it just feels angry, doesn't it? And Doug Oates from Elmira Prison said the same thing when we talked about that. He goes, you go to the side of the 7th, 10th, the 37th, and the 2nd Rhode Island, right there, and this is where the Colonel Eustace's 2nd Brigade was. You just feel this like this. I don't know. It just feels like and I don't know why. There's no.
We talked to somebody else that was there, and he said he experienced the same thing. He had to leave the area because he started to get angry, and he had no idea why.
I mean, I know you get angry all the time, and maybe that's why I'm dealing with that.
So Ryan's on here from England. We saw that the Kearney Church, right, where he was.
We did see the Kearney Church, St. Mary's. That was a trip that John took us on. That was really cool too because we saw Stone. He's one of Mosby's Rangers buried there. And it's where Kearney's funeral was. Clara Barton had her headquarters there after Second Manassas. So there's a lot of really, really cool history. And, our friends and one of our sponsors, Civil War Trails, for this podcast, they have that area dotted. I mean, there's a lot of cool places that we went to that John took us to.
Yeah.
And if you're in the Mosby thing, in that Fairfax area, Burke, places like that, there's so many cool places to go visit. Fairfax Station's fantastic.
Yeah. And so what was that Stoughton House called?
The Gunnell House.
The Gunnell House. Yeah, that was cool to see in the courthouse and all that. And it's just really. We wandered into that law office.
we couldn't get inside because of it's a house and it's next to a church there. But we peeked in the windows and John, who's a great tour guide, he should be doing tours in Fairfax. Not that he should be, but you can look up the stairs and you can see where Mosby went up the stairs. He points out the bedroom where he caught Stoughton, whacked him in the ass with a sword, which is my profile picture on Facebook now. If you hit him in the ass with a sword, but that's what's cool about it though. And you're not going to read about these things in Battle Cry of Freedom, the big books, because these are those little tiny soldier stories. Yeah. And that's not really a tiny one, but you learn a lot about some of these people that aren't known to history until you go and visit these places. And it's just so cool when you see some of these places.
Yeah, it is. I love all the Fairfax stuff. That was like so cool. And then going to we saw Mary Surratt's grave, we saw Henry Wurz's grave, and then we got to go to where the conspirators were tried at Fort McNair. And so you see the courtroom and the props from the Conspirator movie, and then see where.
Yeah, I mean, that was a cool thing. I mean, we set up a tour with at Fort McNair to go into the courtroom of the Lincoln conspirator trial, and we did that about a week or so ago.
Yeah.
And
sorry, go ahead.
no, whatever.
No, I'll talk about it after because it's a different subject.
Oh, it's somebody with a short term, thing going there. Anyway, but you walk in there and it's the same courtroom, and if you see it, it's not a public place you can just get to. They only opened a couple times a year, but if you get a chance to go, it's in Washington D.C. It's right near that soccer stadium where the United play, and it's right near where the baseball team plays, the Nationals. But you go on there and you walk in, it's the Grant House, and it's the third floor, and you go up there and it's set up the exact same way. They have little pictures of where the justices sit. You can see where, exactly where the Holt and Bingham, the prosecutors were. You can see where Hunter, Couts, Albion, Howe, Eakin, Clendenin, Wallace, Foster, Harris, and Tompkins, the justices, where they all sat by their pictures, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And then you can see where they had the conspirators lined up on trial, and you can see exactly where they sat. And then there's some back rooms where they have some actual things, like Mary Surratt's her black veil she wore. But it's really cool that if you're into that type of history. And we did a Facebook Live outside of it, where the gallows were.
Yeah.
And it was really creepy to walk inside it's in a tennis court, and the fence of the tennis court basically runs where the gallows were. But you can go and you can walk in the tennis court towards the gallows, like in the literal footsteps of these people about to be hanged. And then you can stand and turn around and look out and see pretty much exactly what their last sights would have been before they put the mask on, before they hanged them.
Yeah.
And it's just a creepy part of history. But I mean, it's history, and you have to go and appreciate those type of things. You can see where they actually buried them. They were buried there on site, right where the tennis court was, just behind it, for about 2 years till the families were able to get the bodies. And you can still see the dip in the ground from where the graves or the indentation was. I don't think that counts as an undulation, Mary, but you can still see where they were. And it's just a creepy feeling to it. And then we went over to see Mary Surratt's grave over Mount Olivet. She's buried not about 100 yards from John Lloyd, if you know the conspiracy trial. He's the one who basically dropped dime on her about the shooting irons and the field glasses.
Yeah.
And then Henry Words, you mentioned. Speaking of hanging out, Mary, the guy from Andersonville, and he's buried right near them, and he's got a mean-looking gravestone. It says, Confederate hero and martyr, it says on his grave.
Yeah, it's really ugh.
I know somebody on social media who's not going to like that one.
Oh,
so there might even be some AI made about that one.
Yes.
But I digress. But that's none of my business.
Those AI generators are about as creative as the people utilizing them.
Oh, well, that's a whole thing. It's just so stupid. But but it's a cool thing to do, and I know they're trying to make it more. The woman who brought us in there is a military veteran, and it's funny because we went in there, and at first they didn't want us taking pictures because it's a government thing. Then they were like,
they're like, whatever. Yeah, Rob commented that the pictures of the courtroom make it look so small. It's actually not a very big room. So you can imagine, like, when they were all in there, and then they had all these reporters in there as well.
And they have it laid out exactly the way it was. And I think Mary mentioned this a bit ago, but a lot of the stools and the tables are props from the movie The Conspirator.
Which The Conspirator was not filmed there. It was not filmed. They made a set for it, but then after the movie, they donated them to the Grant Hall at Fort McNair, so they could, because they do living history events there. I know our friend Dave Taylor has done some stuff there.
That's right.
As well. I think he's done some reenacting there. But it was a really, really cool experience to see that. Just real quick, Rob asked if we have any book club plans for the year. We do. We are hopefully going to.
We were just talking about that, Mary, as a matter of fact, in a 7-hour car ride home the other day, and I think some
tentative ones are Searching for George Gordon Meade by Tom Huntington. We did his book, Main Roads to Gettysburg, and he has a George Meade biography that came out a few years ago, and it's really good. And then another one we are considering is the new book about Albert Sidney Johnson by our friend Western Theater Tim Smith.
Yeah.
He's got what's the Albert Sidney Johnson book? Iron Dice of Battle.
Right. That one's going to be here. That's a great book. Hampton Newsom's book.
Yes.
About North Carolina. That'll be one of the books. We just got to coordinate with the authors. That's the whole thing. So we have an idea of what we're going to do. There's going to be a few of them. We just did Elizabeth Varon's book. It wasn't a book club; it was an actual a formal episode that she wanted to do, and that's a good one too.
Which is that if any of you have a chance to read the new Longstreet biography by Elizabeth Varon, it is really good, and it looks more at his post-war. Like the first 100 pages are like that's the Civil War, and then it looks more at his post-war. The fact that a lot of the stuff about Longstreet, his reputation started to change after he became a Republican, and a lot of it was led by Jubal Early. I think was one of the ones.
Yeah, and there's a lot of if you want, there's a lot of good books on Longstreet. The War Longstreet, obviously Jeffrey Wirt, Corey Favre got books on that.
Yeah.
But this one's interesting because it talks about the post-war and it's very different. So if you're into Reconstruction, if you're into that part of history, then check it out. It's definitely worth it. It's a great read, and it gives you a really good insight in what's in the noggin of James Longstreet. I mean, it just does. Really, But that's cool. But we'll have those. We just gotta pick the dates. We're gonna reach out to the authors. But those ones we know of as now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And Tom's book on Meade came out, it might even be like 10 years ago now, but it's a really interesting biography, how he writes it. He's a great guy. We had him on for, some of you were on our Main Roads to Gettysburg book club, but he's a great guy. And Tim Smith is fun too. We had him on for, one of his books, his book on, cavalry horse soldiers.
Yeah, no, he's a good dude. He's he knows the stuff. I mean, it's amazing when you talk to some of these people, who just know the history on that level. But then, this past couple of weeks, we got to hang out with a lot of people who don't write books but have their own stories. We've said this a million times. The stories you hear in bars and by bumping into people in some of these battlefield towns. Spencer Waldron, our friend Spencer, he's a former Ranger. At Gettysburg at Wilderness, battlefield guide. He's retired now, and he texted me and we were in town, so we had a couple beers with him over at the it's at Sweeney's Tavern, and he was telling us all these cool stories. And then he ended up he said, "Hey, what are you guys doing this week? I'll take you down to Neal Avenue to Lost Land." And I was like, "Well, that's fine," but I said, I don't want to have to deal with the whole Dean Schultz thing. He's like, "No." He goes, "I know a way." He goes, there's a way you can go. It's not an easy walk, but if you want to go, we'll go, and you'll see McAllister's Mills. And we had just gone down there on the other side the day before, and so we took us down the old McAllister Mill Road, all the way down, and it's amazing. It's just like a ruin. There's trees and rocks everywhere. They used to roll carriages down there, and some of the stories that he told us, just of stuff about being a ranger and stuff they found on the battlefield, stuff that's gone on there, and all the stuff that people don't even know about. It was just, it's like sitting with your grandpa listening to stories.
And he's a really nice, fun guy.
He's a great guy, and just like all the knowledge he has about different things, and they don't. I mean, just the things about how many bodies are buried still there, where they think they might be, and there's little things that live, these little cool stories of real history that are mouth to mouth stories, right?
Yeah.
And there's so many cool people like that down there and in other places. Yeah. But that's what's great about history is you get to talk to the people who really know the stuff that you're not going to read about, because some of the stuff he told us, is not in books.
No.
Right. And it's not secret stuff. It's nothing that we're holding back. It's just stuff that he told us about where people were and attitudes towards people. He told us a good story about, a lot of the Sixth Corps guys, who, when they, in a lot of the 12th Corps guys, when they left Culp's Hill, they basically, kind of almost
like
purposely got lost just because they didn't want to deal with it. They just hung out and they knew where they were, and they got back to fight Culp's Hill. And so there's a lot of cool things and opinions that he has like this. And a lot of people.
And he's a David Ireland guy too, which is awesome.
Well, it was funny getting him going about the Ireland Chamberlain thing, because
he's like, David
because
Ireland.
he's like Chamberlain, he saved the flank and he saved the country and he saved the world. and he saved all, and he just really blew it up. And look, we like ourselves. I love me some Joshua Chamberlain, good New England guy, but he agrees with us that the rubber hits the road on Culp's Hill. And when you see, everybody here has been at Gettysburg, but when you see how close the Confederates were to Baltimore Pike, and how the necessity of evacuating would have happened if they took that, and how much of George Sears Green's, those 4 regiments held that flank. And because if the Confederates got up there, they weren't leaving. If they got up to Little Round Top, they were getting pushed off of the 6th Corps. And and I think because of the movie, it really talks about the importance of that. It's definitely important, but at the same time, there are other things that they leave out. And hearing him go about that was pretty funny, because the only time he got a little fired up was talking about Ireland.
Oh yeah, he's clearly Team Ireland, which is awesome. I know MJ, she's on here, she is too. MJ also mentions that, just back to the Lincoln assassination, she mentions about Hancock, that it, like, hanging Surratt haunted Hancock for a while in his life, something he was ordered to do but didn't want to.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of people like that in history, but I think, that was an ugly situation. I mean, if you really read about that trial, it was a true kangaroo court.
Yeah,
where they were all military generals. They justified that it was a military court because in their mind, Washington, D.C. was considered a fort from the Civil War, and so it was a crime committed on federal property of a fort, which was really because when they tried John Surratt a couple years later with the same evidence and the same people, witnesses, it was a civil court, and it was found it was a hung jury. It wasn't not guilty. It was a hung jury on that same evidence. And the lead prosecutor, got him Joseph Holt. I mean, he's a legal advisor to it. You guys like John Bingham, people like that, where it was so corrupt, and they were basically, you're trying to, if you're a guy like if you're a guy like a Frederick Aiken, for example, which was the judge. I mean, the defense of Mary Surratt and the conspirators' defense attorney. You're trying to make objections, and the prosecutor is telling the judges, Hunter and Couts and Halby and how those guys, no, don't. And they'd be like, nope. Yeah. It was a true mess. It really was. And after the trial, the 9 justices, 5 of them felt that Mary shouldn't hang. And then there was a big fiasco with President Johnson. And at the end of the day, she certainly did, the first woman executed by the United States for crime. And her grave is an angry one. It just is. It's a sad one.
Sad, angry grave. Ryan mentions Culp's Hill, where Lee's old teacher, George Green, schools the Rebs.
You know what?
Lee's old teacher, George Green, Pops Green.
Oh, I just talking out of your mind.
No,
I didn't realize it was a comment. I don't really read the comments stuff. Sometimes I do, but no. But there's so many things about it, and when you just completely understand, you talk about people, all these stories make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing, is there are people on both sides that are. Some on social media might not think there are.
I thought there were vampires on one of the sides. I saw
movie once. I thought too. Well, that's the way they make it seem.
No, but you have to look. You have to do it. When you talk about both sides of it, you have to look at the mindset on both. And look, I get it. There was no one's denying who's fighting for what and all that stuff. But at the same time, when you can't always look at the big picture and then use it for the small picture. You have to you have to individualize it. You really do.
Yeah, I mean, like I think it was sorry, go ahead.
Especially when you go to a place like Fairfax and you see a town like that, and you see some of the stuff they were, you gain a certain understanding. I don't want to say appreciation, but you gain a certain understanding.
Yes. Right? Yeah. And I mean, I've grown to really, like, Mosby's one of my favorites. Like, he's such an interesting character, not just in the war, but like after the war too, how he is like a Longstreet, and he gets totally like blackballed basically for how he is. And he's one of these ones that is trying to break the myth of Jeb Stuart at Gettysburg, saying like, actually, guys, it didn't happen that way. He was, it's not as bad as what it seems.
Yeah. And that's a problem. We talked about McClellan a lot here, and about how the media and stories that happened a long time ago become indisputable facts by some people. Right. And you know, somebody said we were McClellan fanboys recently, Mary. Someone said that to us, and I would disagree with that.
Well, I think you almost like, and you explained it so well. You almost do come across that way because there is so much hate towards McClellan to a point where it's like you are making people angry that you're even saying, well, maybe he's not that bad, because just the narrative of him has been such like spun in such a way that, you know, rehabilitating him is tough. And you know, you do come across as like, well, what are you, like a fanboy or fangirl for him? But like, you know, and we've said this before, like we acknowledge the fact McClellan's an arrogant bastard, but tell me which one of these guys wasn't. You know, the other argument was he makes fun of Lincoln. Okay, well, can you please tell me who Lincoln, like Lincoln was not a saint. He's not an angel. He makes fun of people.
Lincoln was not popular in his time.
He wasn't. That's
by
the thing.
anybody.
He becomes popular and elevated because of what happens to him with the assassination.
Right.
Yes, he does great things for the country. He's probably the greatest president this country has had.
I don't know. I go back and forth.
I go back and forth. That like I think Garfield's one of my favorites too. Like I love.
But you can't say it was Garfield wasn't one of the best.
I like Garfield.
No, but he was. You could say he was one of the best presidents, though. He was president for 10 minutes. I mean, you know, but
I think he would have been one of the greatest.
He could have been, but he's up there with Washington and FDR, and there's a group, and you can make a case. You know, it doesn't matter who the hell you like, but he's certainly one of them. But again, he was put in the toughest spot that probably any U.S. president's ever had to deal with, right? Mm-hmm. And he saved the country when a lot of people, guys like Buchanan, would have probably let him walk away. It's not worth the fight. What's the point? And he changed the narrative from a loose confederation of states into a strong federal government, and I know, and that's absolutely the truth. And because of that, you didn't see. You ultimately saw a strong country that would show itself later on. Spanish-American War, 1890s, obviously World War I. Because if the Confederates had won that war, you're looking at probably at least 3 countries here.
Yeah.
Right. Who's to say the western part of the country doesn't side with Japan in World War II? Right. I mean, you never know how, and you can play that out, but you never know. You never know how history might have gone. So the Lincoln holding firm to keep the country together has worldwide historical, you know, who the hell knows how the world would be today if he didn't do that. And it would have been very easy in 1862 when the shit wasn't good for him to say it isn't worth it. Yeah. What's the point of it? Because you had people in the North who didn't want to fight, who didn't want it anymore.
You know, and again, Facebook would show that they were all fighting for the same thing. And
well, that's Facebook. Friggin' Facebook.
I know. You know, I just like to make, because it's like, it's honestly just a minority of people, but it's funny. It just makes me roll my eyes and laugh. You know, it's like here we go again.
Right. I mean, but again, people. What's good about Facebook is you can hold firm to a point of complete ignorance, like grim death, and never let it go. In the face of pure facts, right in your face. Right. Yeah. But again, it's you know what, it's your whatever. You know, some people like Lionel Richie, some people don't. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Tammy just mentioned she's got a Mosby memoir to listen to in her audiobooks. That's pretty cool. My background today is John Mosby. See if I can. There he is.
There he is. Yep. No, but it's a great, Mosby stuff is really, really great because you're reading his memoirs in real time. Now, he was one of the guys who got accused of, you know, of jumping the fence and, you know, campaign for U.S. grants. And all. He did a lot of things for help Reconstruction. Not as bad as Longstreet did, but he was going in the right direction. But at the end of the day, his memoirs are great because he really, first of all, he has a real crush on Jeb Stuart. Just call it what it is. I mean, it was a Fremantle versus Hood situation from the movie. It was really good, but he really debunks a lot of the Jeb stuff. And when you first read it, you go, okay, he's trying to protect Jeb, get it. But then when he comes up with, he prints Robert E. Lee's actual plan. Yeah. And how it veers off from the narrative that Marshall and Taylor had spun afterwards.
Yeah.
You kind of realize, okay, there's an agenda here, right? And how you fall for that agenda is ultimately how you're going to find history. right? So people, every time someone's late, where's Jeb, right?
Yep.
That's
Oh yeah,
the
that
truth.
whole thing.
And the
Our friend
movie,
Ed Lowe is on here, by the way.
Ed Lowe. Hey Ed, how are you doing, man?
That's cool.
Ed's a good dude. He's a Chickamauga Chattanooga Roundtable, which when
I
you
think
finish
he might have a
school,
book out about
he
Longstreet.
does. He does.
Yeah.
Longstreet, really?
I think it. I know he's got a book out.
It definitely is, but we got to get involved in that chat, that group again. We've been busy with other things, but that's Ed's the guy. How we actually met,
I know Ed is why we met. Yes, pretty cool.
Back in the day, back in COVID.
Yep.
Back a million years ago. Back when you were still in prison. Plague. Back when you were still behind bars.
Yeah, in Canada. What we got to do sometime, it's kind of diverging away from this, but like every so often, like Ed does like a kayak thing down the Chickamauga Creek. I want to do that sometime.
No, we got to get back to Chickamauga. We ran into him and his wife. We over there at the visitor center.
Yeah.
It was that pouring rain day. Remember how hard it rained that day, and everything was floating, but we still got to the battlefield. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So Ed's book comes out in February. It's called Longstreet in East Tennessee.
That's right. I remember thinking the Tennessee and Longstreet in East Tennessee. That's a good one there because you talk a lot. I'm sure he's going to talk a lot about the Battle of Knoxville against Burnside and the icy slopes and all that stuff. That's a fascinating battle and how what he does post Chickamauga, Chattanooga, and how that whole thing goes. And how long I don't think it was. I think Ed will agree. It wasn't Longstreet's greatest moments, but I think. But I know Ed will be fair and he'll talk about it. And we'll definitely maybe we'll have when that book comes out, man. Maybe we have Ed in our book club.
That would be cool, and it's through Savas Beatty, so we'll definitely be able to get a copy of it.
We'll definitely do that.
Yeah, that would be. I was just thinking that that would be a great book club.
That I promise we will promote the hell out of that book for you because I know you're a knowledge guy. I know it'll be a good book, and I think it'll be a subject I think a lot of people appreciate. So absolutely.
Yeah. Got a new person on here. E. Houston. He said first time here after the Addressing Gettysburg show you did this week. That's right.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Matt Callery of Addressing Gettysburg. We were on his show it was like a 2-hour discussion. It was a really great discussion. Just about our podcasting in general, history, how things are, and like what it's like being like studying the Civil War.
It was fun. We were on that for a while, and so I mean the best part was when we stopped and we ran for like an hour, the three of us just talking afterwards, and there was some laughs. I mean, Addressing Gettysburg is a good. They're a good group. And Matt's new studio was pretty cool. And so we got to go in there for a while. I'm so jealous
of that studio. I can't wait to make my own studio, like a studio for us.
Yeah, but it's pretty.
It's space to do it.
It's pretty cool though. I mean, it is, and he does a good job. And so we're talking about maybe doing something with him in Winchester down the road. So we kick some ideas around with that. Yeah. So we'll figure that out. But welcome. That's pretty cool. And so we talk about everything here, Confederate, Northern. We're Northerners, but we talk about everything. So welcome aboard.
We kind of go all over the place with stuff too. So, but yeah, all opinions are welcome. Whoever you like kind of thing.
Even Howard,
you said it was a very interesting show. Thank you guys, although I didn't get much work done during it.
Yeah, well, welcome to our world. Theoretically, I was working remotely that week, so I was on the clock for that one. Theoretically, I suppose. But
but it's like good, even Howard. Yes,
but it's good. It's good though because you can. It's interesting to get other perspectives of different people with this, and they focus. They focus obviously on Gettysburg. just like Eric does with Jim on the Battle of Gettysburg podcast. And we touch on Gettysburg a little bit, but we kind of do we try to do everything else too. Gettysburg is definitely our love. It's without our favorite, but at the same time, it's the lead up to Gettysburg, the post Gettysburg, how Gettysburg affected other battles. We've always said Gettysburg is like the quarterback. If you're looking at a football team, right? Yep. Gets all the press, gets all the love. But Chickamauga, Chattanooga, that's the linemen, the ones who do all that mud work, who get the mud in their face, who don't get the names out there. Battle of Richmond in Kentucky, Pea Ridge, right? Yeah. Places like that. All those battles that lead to bigger ones.
Yeah.
Shiloh's great, but you got to know Pea Ridge, right? You got to know that.
Exactly. Yeah, and you have to know Corinth after to is part of the
Right.
story too.
Fort
Kind of
Donelson's great, but you got no Paducah, right?
Yeah.
You have everything builds into something else, and you want a kind of a worldly thing. So we have fun with it. We definitely do. So hopefully you come back. We do episodes. We record episodes too. It isn't just these lives. So
we do it all. And we have the book club too, which is, I think we're gonna have Ed on this year for we got another book now, his book Longstreet in East Tennessee. So that'll be
we'll get a copy of that, and then we'll when that gets released, and then we'll have him on the book. That'd be cool. I know he definitely would like to talk about that, so we'll definitely do that.
Yep. Frank said, I spent my winter break studying about more units and people in the war. I found out that the 26th Alabama fought at Gettysburg and Franklin, and now I need to study that unit more.
That's what's great about these is you find these regiments, right? And then for whatever reason it resonates with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it tracks back, and you find out these other guys.
Yeah.
And I have obviously 16th Maine is kind of my binky regiment, right? As is the 137th New York, 2nd Massachusetts. I got a whole bunch of them. It's kind of like, I'm like Taylor Swift. I got all kinds of.
I like the 73rd PA because they were in the Eastern and the Western Theater. And MJ just said, this is really sweet of her to say, so you guys open the door for people to learn more about the Western Theater from your work. Well, thank you.
Oh, I appreciate that.
I mean, I came into this. I mean, I started off with my first Civil War love with kind of Gettysburg, but then I got into the Western Theater and Vicksburg, Chickamauga, Chattanooga, and all that, just because, like, I don't know, I find some of the people out there, they don't get studied as much, and they're so fascinating. Like, for instance, Patrick Clayburn or Hiram Granberry are very interesting. And, Howard and Slocum go out there after Gettysburg. And it's kind of, especially for Howard, like that, kind of that rejuvenation of the career, that he's able to go out there and lead an army and be respected. It's all like, it's really fascinating, and they all tie in together. And then you see, like, even in the Civil War, there is this competition between the Eastern Theater and the Western Theater
and that goes park to park too,
Oh, it does. Yeah. When I walked into when I walk into Chickamauga for the first time, I walk into the visitor center, and it was kind of a cooler day. It was earlier in the morning, and I've got my Gettysburg hoodie on, and the ranger's like, oh no, you need to leave now. And I'm like, what? And he was just joking with me. But that led into him telling me that, so Chickamauga National Military Park was the first military park to open as a Civil War battlefield in 1895. And Gettysburg opened soon after that. But Chickamauga, I mean, if you've been there, they have a ton of cannons. So does Gettysburg. Chickamauga used to have a lot more cannons. And the reason they don't have as many as they did when the park first opened is because they had to send a lot of them to Gettysburg. And that's what this ranger told me, was there was this kind of rivalry, because Gettysburg, they were like, yeah, we need your cannons. And Chickamauga was kind of like, what? You can't take our cannons. So some of the cannons that you see at Gettysburg weren't actually in that battle. I mean, probably a lot of them weren't in the battle, but they are originally from Chickamauga National Military Park, that's just an interesting story. Said Western Theater, meaning Aldi.
Oh yeah, that well-known Western Cavalier Justin Kilpatrick against Thomas Munford, the battle for the West, that cavalry battle.
Isn't he talking about Luigi?
Oh yeah, it says no. Yeah, I forgot who I was talking to for a second.
He told us, we were hanging out in DC with him, and he was like, "Yeah, in your episode, you said you were going to talk about him, and then you never did."
Yeah, we have fun with that, God's sake. But we had definitely have fun with that, though. But as Louisa says, Nola, gotta appreciate that. No question about that.
Yeah, Frank says he's got many regiments he wants to study more. The 3rd Arkansas, the 24th South Carolina, the 13th USCT, 20th Mass, 59th New York.
But every one of them has different pluses and minuses. And what's cool about it is, when you look at this, you look at the 16th Maine. Okay, and I know this is my regiment, Charles Tilden's guys, Oak Ridge. The monument says 275 men were at that salient, but there was 330. So Park Service, get your shit together, not for nothing, right? So they end up having to retreat back, and all but 30 get caught. And the 30 who make it back to Cemetery Hill, a lot of those guys get stuck going to a Chamberlain, to Little Round Top. So you end up fighting on the 1st against Ed O'Neill and George Doles and Ramseur and all those guys. Junius Daniel, and then you end up having to fight the 15th to 47th Alabama, and right off the bat. So that's how these guys were. but that's the thing. That's what's cool about it is you see where these guys fought, what they did, and the fact when you throw in the fact that these guys are farmers and merchants and lawyers and shopkeepers, we're not talking about trained military guys. And then we got later in the war when you talk about Overland Campaign when they start pulling like the 8th New York, right? You're talking about heavy artillery guys who literally never been in battle. They were in charge of guarding the forts of Baltimore and Washington. And their uniforms are so clean and shiny. They look, brand new.
Yeah.
And they were basically the red Star Trek shirts because you knew they were going down. They got put right at the front of the line of the Battle of freaking Cold Harbor. But that's what's fascinating about this is you realize the plight of some of these guys and where they went and how they got there. But everyone has a regiment they love and they follow it. That's why people say, your favorite general. I don't care about that. I like the regiments, right?
It's still okay to have like a favorite general though.
No, it is, but the thing about
it, you become kind of the champion. Like, I don't want to say the champion, but you have someone like, MJ who studies Hancock, and then you have Hessler, like our friend Jim Hessler, who studies Sickles. And then we met that kid at Fredericksburg, who's like, my favorite general is Slocum, and it's like. I was just like, I said to him, you hold on.
The thing about it is, I remember we would talk. I don't know who the hell we were talking last week, but we said, I'd love to get to know General Slocum. It's like, no, you wouldn't. Has anybody met a military general today?
Oh yeah, you wouldn't want to hang out with them.
No. So it's like I think if you went back in time and you went to a time machine, right, and you met Howard or you meet Hancock or any of these people. You're not going to like what you see because he's a rigid military. They are.
They're still human though, and they like to.
No, they're human, but you get to a certain level, you get to a certain point where I think it'd be more fun, even like a Sickles type of guy. You don't get to be a corps commander, you don't get to be a major general, you don't be any of this stuff until without a certain type of that duende, as we call it, right? That attitude. Yeah. I'd be a good general. I'm a mean prick. Actually, I wouldn't be. I'm a lover, not a fighter.
I think your cousin's on here. He said Brian. He said real talk.
He's not cousin. He's my half brother.
Oh, half brother.
What's up, Brian? Say hi to your mother for me. Brian's awesome.
He said Roll Tide.
Roll Tide, yeah. I had that one wrong, by the way.
Brian on here, a different Brian, said that he got Battle Cry of Freedom, Longstreet by Elizabeth Varon, and Shiloh by Winston Groom. And he said our episode about Shiloh made him want to learn it more. Well, thank you for that, Brian. And those are all awesome books.
That was the episode where my microphone was frigged up, wasn't it?
Yeah.
When it had this weird noise.
Yeah.
That's how I think.
I know we were going to do like this year we don't know.
That was like 2 years ago. That was a while ago.
Oh, it was 3 years ago.
Mm.
Yep. And then Tammy said she's researching the 2nd Tennessee Volunteers, but she's hitting roadblocks. I think it's Ben said he's attempting to learn more about the 4th and 5th Texas related to Round Top.
Yeah.
And Brian said he got the Longstreet book because of our episode. That's pretty cool. That's
pretty cool.
That's good. No, we're glad like people are reading her book because it's really great. It's a good book. And I mean, the more books you have on a subject, the more you're getting different interpretations and all that. Gentili said he'd be a great quartermaster.
Yeah, I'm sure he would be.
Why am I?
But no, we mentioned so much of the 4th and 5th Texas. I mean, you want to. I mean, it's a smaller scale, but go up Round Top. If you've been around Top lately, you see that little road they have going up the side of the hill where the trucks have been going up. That's pretty much where the 4th and 5th Texas went up. These are the guys who fought against Patty O'Rourke, the 140th New York, and walked that ground. You're crawling on your stomach, inch to inch, rock to rock. 16th Michigan, 44th New York, and now you got the 140th Patty O'Rourke's guys coming right down that hill.
Yeah,
he takes one in the throat and dies. By the way, doesn't make it. Luck of the Irish, right there.
Yeah,
Buster got shot in the armpits. Patty got shot in the throat.
Yeah, Gentili said he'd be far away from the front lines.
Shocker. Freaking Gentili. But I mean, when you get to there and when they finally do open up Round Top and you get to kind of go up there again. Although I think you could walk up, I don't know, you could probably get up there to a certain point. I
would not want to attempt it though, knowing that they've probably got cameras up there and stuff.
Oh, I know they do. I know they have cameras up there.
Aren't those people from that podcast? Like, no. Be on
No, I
Gettysburg
mean, you know what though?
Crimes website.
I mean, if it is going to open by July of 24, people can wait. I mean, everyone's seen that view a million times anyway. But yeah, but I know if you walk down to like the Michigan Monument and keep walking down in the face of the Fourth and Fifth Texas coming up that hill,
Yeah.
You can see. I mean, imagine climbing this seriously. In Robertson's Texas get all broken up, or they start coming around the savannah of Devil's Den, going up Round Top, right?
Yeah.
In the first Texas, they marked the same path that you and I did to Triangular Field.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds when you look at these maps, you see the big red arrow moving across the field.
Yep.
But you walk some of these grounds, and I don't know how the hell they would have made it, especially when some of these guys have horses. Some of the officers.
Oh, that's what we were talking about with one of our friends, is like the whole, like, how do you make it around these areas with a horse? I know there was one battle in the Western Theater. I think it was Pea Ridge or the Kentucky campaign, where it rained and they had to move. This is from the Confederate side. They had to move the artillery wagons up this hill, and the mud was it was terrible. And the horses weren't able to do it. And Patrick Claiborne was one of the guys that, like, he was out there pushing. They had to like move the wheels along in this mud. That was one of the things we talked about in the episode. I think it was the Kentucky campaign. We talked about Claiborne doing that, where he was like having to like kind of push things along.
Yeah, that doesn't. I mean, and we talk about Round Top. I mean, just Hazelt's Battery getting up there, that back road down by where that restaurant is down. If you know the area, where you take the right on Wheatfield Road, right there. You're going up that road past where the old amusement park used to be. You're having to pull guns up there. I mean, there's a lot of effort that goes into this stuff. I mean, and how you, when you think about it, if you see those guns, when every gun requires 10 guys and 14 horses.
And how much water?
Right, a whole bunch of water. Yeah. How are you going to end up getting all these people up there logistically? How this whole thing goes? I look at these cannon on these battlefields, and I think about the logistics of kind of how the whole thing happened. And a couple of places have it marked well. Cushing's Battery over there at the angle has it marked just right. You get the 14 yards between the caisson and the battery, the caisson, the limber and the gun.
Yeah.
And a lot of places don't. East Cemetery Hill sort of has it with Weidrich's and Dilger. Those batteries. Weidrich's Battery. But for the most part, when you look at this stuff and you imagine in real time how a lot of this stuff must have went, it's just fascinating.
Oh, it is. And Bjorn's on here from one of our sponsors for Civil War. For our podcast.
Hello,
is
Bjorn.
Abraham Lincoln Bookshop in Chicago, and he said, "Hey nerds, I once went out into Triangle Field. That's one of the places at Gettysburg where it's worth it to go out of your way."
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we wanted to walk from the Texas Monument across, right across the field we ended up doing most of it, but we ended up walking from Rose Farm and then cutting around basically like south and east and cutting through most of the muck. I would challenge anyone who's been to Gettysburg, and you really have to be able to walk. I don't mean just like, I mean, because there are rocks that you can't see under long, tall grass.
Yeah.
If you walk that ground, first of all, you will get the absolute best view of Devil's Den and Little Round Top you've ever seen in your life, ever. But you have to do it off season because there's way too much. I mean, there is the tick situation, the snake situation,
the Rosewoods Clown.
Well, Rosewoods Clown's a little northwest. I mean,
the
northeast.
Union Ghost.
He's watching. Yeah, that was weird. We saw that.
I was like, the more I thought about it, because I had this real creepy feeling when I looked over at whatever or whoever that was, and as we were talking, I personally think it was an apparition starts turning its head, and I'm like, nope.
Well, so we're over,
and then I looked and it was gone.
Well, so we're standing over. I wanted to show Mary where the Confederate dead pickers were, the Georgians at the Rose Farm. And so we're over at the Split Rock in that area, and we're walking across the fields. We're gonna kind of jump a little fence there and then kind of work our way through Triangular Field. And we look, and through the woods there's a person just and it had like a kepi hat on, and the way the light was, it was silhouetted.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I don't know of any statues down there.
And that's what you said to me first. Right? Is there's not a statue?
And I'm like, what the hell? I have a pretty good bearing on all the statues in that battlefield. And I'm like, I don't know of one there. And I'm looking at it, and all of a sudden it turns its head. We're like, boom, right?
Yeah, and then I looked back and it was gone.
But it was a couple hundred yards away. It was through the
Yeah.
woods, and you could see it because the trees were down. And then we walked back, and there was nobody back there. So I was like, I'm like, well, I don't know.
And I was like, I just got this creepy feeling as soon as I looked. I'm like, is that real?
It looked like one of those. You ever see those videos where people walk up to the statue and they think it's a statue, it's a person, and they freak out? It was like that. But it's like maybe a couple hundred yards away. It was like a silhouetted guy in a Civil War kepi looking out. And then it just turned its head. And then we're like, oh, it's a person. And we walked around there. You can't, there's no cars. And we didn't see anybody.
There was no way you could get back. And there was also like, it was like that person had to want it to get back there. Like,
oh, well, they were. That was a tough spot. But that's a cool place to go, though. And I would challenge anyone to make that walk because it is so cool if you do it. And you could pick up the old trolley thing and cut through the woods afterwards if you don't want to make it all the way to Devil's Den. But that walk from the Rose Farm to the foot of the triangular field leading up to Devil's Den, it's a fantastic hike, but you gotta want it. It's not easy. It's not. That's why when that guy on social media said, "Oh, $250,000 tourists," I mean, like, no, they haven't.
Yeah, he's like, "Yeah, they have." I'm like, okay. Bjorn said he loved our pictures from Neil's Lane too.
Oh, that's cool. Neil's Lane was really, really cool because we got the Confederate perspective a few days before, and this is the Union perspective, and this is another place that people don't get to because they don't know how to get there. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to go to Lost Lane, Neil Avenue, you can go to the visitor center, and they'll contact a guy named Dean Schultz who owns the property. It's kind of in the middle of two private properties, and you don't want to walk across his yard because that's private property. You don't want to be a dick if you do that. And I always thought, and admittedly, that was the only way to get there. I thought it was landlocked, and that was the way to do it. But then our friend Spencer showed us that the way you could actually get there by going in between the properties, and you have to know exactly where you're going.
Oh yeah,
exactly. And you're walking on this really rocky path, which is another tough walk, and you can get to it, and it's great because you see like the monument of the 7th Maine, right? Lieutenant Colonel Selden Connor, right?
Yeah.
Where he was, and you see like with the New Yorkers, the 43rd New York, and the 49th New York, the monuments that lead up to it, and it's pristine. And there was only a couple of casualties, but they're fighting, Allegheny Johnson's retreating Confederates coming off of Culp's Hill, and they're just pot shots, just skirmishing. But it's a part of the battlefield that very few people get out to. But they take care of it, though. I mean, it's really, really well maintained.
It is. It's such a cool area. And that like one area where we finally got down, we went with our friend Kevin the day before to see one side of where McAllister's mill was. And then the next day we went with Spencer to see the other side of it. So that was pretty cool to see that. Yeah.
And it's neat because I was taking pictures the whole time because I knew I had a couple of pictures from the old McAllister's Mill Road. McAllister's Mill, if you don't know it, it was a mill right on the creek. It was part of the Underground Railroad before the war too. And it's nothing. It's just ruins now.
Yeah.
The site of McAllister Mill is private property. You really can't go on there. But if you're in your car and you are driving into Culp's Hill and you're taking the left for Baltimore, like you just passed the Howard statue, and you pass the Hancock Hamburglar statue, and you keep going down the hill, right? You pass the visitor center on your right, and you take the left to Culp's Hill, and you swing around. You get to a point right before you get to the Second Mass Monument where you're literally driving right past it. You don't even know it. You're that close. You're maybe 50 yards from it, but it curls around. But the way we came down is we went down the road that was an actual road from the mill, and it's now literally trees falling down on boulders, but you can see the road. And I took a picture of it, matched it like a then and now picture. Mm-hmm. And you realize how busy that road was. They used to take carriages down there, all kinds of stuff, right to the mills, but you can still get there.
It's now like a creek bed. It's really like, really just, it's a tough walk. I mean, I commended Spencer. I was like, oh my God, these two, like you two were getting around better than I was. I was like, oh God, am I going to trip and fall? Blah, blah, blah.
Well, especially Spencer. He's an older dude. He's got a cane. And I saw this walk, and I'm like, how the hell is this guy going to do this? Right. And but he made it. But unless you can really, you got to climb over felled trees. You got to like straddle the trees to get around.
Yeah.
How you may usually walk under the trees just a freaking little, but for us normal sized people, you got to climb over them. But that's what's great about a place like Gettysburg is the places you can go. But you got to know where to go, because if you don't want to veer in a private property, because you're talking about 5 feet of walkway.
Yeah, and like there's signs on either side, so you have to be very respectful of people's private property there. Gentilly, Kevin gives a great Georgians at Gettysburg too.
I don't know where Kevin is today.
And then Cisco said, "I'd like to see the Hamburglar statue."
Try Hamburglar statue.
We do have a legit question from Brian Campbell. He said, "I know you guys have done episodes on generals and their lives before, during, and after the war. What other generals would you guys consider doing episodes on?" Well,
we've talked about this a lot, Brian. Now you put the Mary Bat signal up, so I'll let her go with this. Absolutely.
So one of the ones we are definitely going to do this year, probably around the anniversary of Shiloh, maybe a little before, is Lew Wallace. Because he's a guy I've always, like, his thing at Shiloh is just so, he gets thrown under the bus by Grant, and then he has to go and our friend Kevin would tell you, save Cincinnati, which is the story that doesn't get talked about a lot. We've discussed him in our Battle of Monocacy episode, where that's kind of his redemption. So he's definitely one that we want to talk about. Trying to think of who else. I know probably Charles Tilden of the 16th.
Well, but he wasn't a general; he was a colonel. But
not a general, but like a colonel. Yeah.
But that's the thing, is we try to play a both. We've done Barksdale.
We like to do both sides.
We've probably done more Confederates than Union, actually.
I think we have.
But we try to balance them off a little bit, because they're all fascinating stories. We just did one on Hiram Granberry, from Texan, and he's one. I don't think he wasn't born in Texas. We'll give the Texas designation. Yeah. But there are people like that who their stories. We did one on John Brown Gordon, right?
Yeah.
And he's a lightning rod for especially social media. And I get it. I totally do. But when you realize that some of these people have different backgrounds, they're lawyer backgrounds. Gordon is part of the 6th Alabama, raises those raccoon roughs, right? Fights over at the Battle of Seven Pines against your boy Howard, the one-armed man, right? And how hard he fought. And bullets are whizzing by him, and he's standing up there with his hair blowing in the wind, and never gets shot. Yeah. Then he goes to Antietam, he turns into a pincushion. Yeah. Right. But he survives, and he wins for the most part almost every battle he fights in. But what's neat about Gordon is his post-war, part of that Bourbon triumvirate in Georgia, and how he wants to work on Reconstruction a different way, where he wants to play along to get Democrat home rule again by supporting the overall government to get those military districts removed. So when you see the motivation behind a lot of these guys, both pre, during, and post-war, that's what's great about doing the episodes on generals, is because it's a good 360 view on all of them.
Yeah, and you learn about them like during the war, a bit before, and then after. MJ said General Garnett would be a great one.
He's someone we've talked about too. We talked about Garnett, and he really, and Garnett's an unfortunate one too, because he gets a shitty rap from Kernstown, right? Which is unfair.
Well, and this is the friggin' Stonewall.
Well, that right, with the 8th Virginia and all that stuff, and he retreats and gets court-martialed, and we've talked a lot about redemption. Guys like Lamb Willard, for example, right? Garnett's one that really. He was in Beauregard, Shiloh, for that matter.
Yeah.
He was going to either die, or he was going to win or die trying. And there was no question. And it becomes personal redemption at that point. So him riding across after he has that injury and getting kicked by the horse, he's going to stay on the horse. He's going to charge the wall of Gettysburg. And that's because to really restore his honor. And that's what's great about Garnett. And again, forget the whole Confederate shit, the Union, all that. Forget that. This is a guy who had to prove himself. So we mentioned the Triangular Field, Augustus Van Horn Ellis.
Yeah.
If you see his statue, the 124th, the Orange Blossom Regiment from New York, he's standing with his arms folded. And his men said, because they said he stood watching the battle like a farmer watching his field of wheat. And all of a sudden he goes to his Lieutenant Colonel Cromwell. The men have to see us today. Meaning we have to show ourselves.
Yeah.
They jump on their horses, go down that triangular field we've been talking about. They both get killed. because of redemption for whatever reason. At that moment, they felt that their life was not as important as what the bigger picture was, and that's what Garnett was. And so when we talk about Garnett, we'll talk about that. So that's what we actually have.
We'll definitely do one on him. And then Bjorn mentions Gail Stevens, Shadow of Shiloh is a great book on Lew Wallace. I've heard that. I need to read it. Gentili mentioned Wesley Merritt would be another good one.
Wesley Merritt's a good one. I mean, the Gettysburg people don't really know a lot about Merritt, but because he was in and out of that. But we'll talk a lot about him. Big on the retreat, right? Yeah. Hagerstown, stuff like that. But he's a good one. We still have to do a Navy one.
Oh yes, yeah. I think 2024 needs to be our Navy episode.
We've been talking about that for years.
And then Ryan mentions Phil Kearney, Dan Butterfield, Hiram Berry, John Turchin, Camille Prince. Is that Polecat?
Yeah, I like the Hiram Berry one. A good Maynard. He's a good one too. When you're looking at how influential the state of Maine was in the Civil War, there's a lot of cool people like that. Lew Wallace is one that's definite because we've been talking about Lew Wallace for a while. And he's an interesting fellow too, because he's I think you said a little while ago, he's the scapegoat for Grant for Shiloh.
Yeah.
And kind of like McClellan, a lot of the stuff said about him has stuck with Shiloh.
I'd be if I was Wallace, I would be like livid if I mean, yes, I'm sure Wallace did make mistakes too, but the way it was like, how Grant sends a guy who's not really probably quote unquote qualified to tell Wallace what to do, and then Wallace is like, WTF? Like, what do you want me to do here? And the guy doesn't really know. But then you look back on Shiloh and you see what happens the night before on April 5th with Sherman, and he hears what turns out to be, I think it's Claiborne's guys. It's Appler, and Appler's like, dude, they're like literally, they're right there. And Sherman's like, no, they're not. They're back at Corinth. Take your damn regiment back to Ohio, as he says it in that Katharine Hepburn voice that you do. And he doesn't like nothing, and they get attacked the next day. And Grant is kind of like, whatever on that, but like Wallace, he's perfectly happy to be like, this bastard.
Well, I mean, Lew Wallace, we mentioned the courtroom. He was kind of a bastard. He was one of the ones who did not vote to change the verdict of Mary Surratt. He was one of the four who held ground with Albion Howe. Sixth Corps was another guy who said no, and David Clendenin and T.M. Harris were the other ones. But Lew Wallace was a hard black and white type of fighter, but he also had a very strong ability to be vindictive.
Yep.
Right. He did. You mentioned Ben-Hur, the chariot scene.
Yes.
He has ways to get his point across, but he
the whole chariot scene is a racehorse between him and Grant, and Wallace won that race, and he was like, well, I'm going to put it in the book. And apparently there's one theory that Ben-Hur's friend in that, the guy that ends up, I think he dies after the chariot scene, is based off of Grant and kind of the friendship they once had. And then what happened with Shiloh just completely broke that.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of like, in a way, autobiographical.
Well, it's a lot like today's politics. Like if you look at federal politics nowadays, if someone screws up, someone's head's going to roll. And the bigger the screw up, the bigger the head, right? And Shiloh was a big one. It absolutely was. And so you have to blame somebody for it, even though they won the battle. If it was not for that 2 or 3 days of rain that slowed Beauregard down from Corinth north, Grant would have been screwed. He probably would have been captured. Then Halleck, who wanted the job, he's going to take over again, right?
Yeah.
I mean, who the hell knows what happened? Imagine Halleck run an overland campaign. Well, I mean, it never would have happened anyway. No. But that's what's cool about this stuff when you look at this. How weather is one of the 3 big things that affects every single battle, along with terrain and communication.
Yeah. Bjorn said, I read that Uncle Blaney always talked like Katharine Hepburn.
He did. Take your damn regiment back to Ohio, and that's what they said his voice sounded like,
Yeah.
Angry Katharine Hepburn.
Angry Katharine Hepburn. Ryan said, Lew Wallace, the best revenge is outselling Grant's book and Shakespeare and Dickens.
Well, Grant wouldn't have survived him if Grant had lived to see that. That was a problem, but he died. It
Yeah.
was fine. I was telling you one time, someone had a first edition copy of Grant's memoirs. They were all excited because it was signed by U.S. Grant, right?
Yep.
And when you realize that he doesn't have it, it's actually he died before the book was published. But every first edition has a facsimile autographed U.S. Grant on the first page. I mean, it was pretty fun to see that.
Yeah. Brian says, I'm from Alabama, so a Navy episode and maybe the Battle of Mobile Bay. Fort Morgan is well preserved. That would be a good one too.
Yeah, we've there's a few we've kicked around. We sit around and just talk about these things all the time, but there's a lot to do because we try to make it timely to around the time of the battle, or if it just pops in our head. But there's so much we got to do. We've done actually a lot of Trans Mississippi and a lot of West. We actually haven't done a lot of Eastern ones.
No,
actually, think about it. Glorieta Pass, I want to do is what I want to do, for example, in honor of my dear departed friend Fritz.
Yes.
I want to, things like that. But there's a lot of good ones. We could go down so many. You mentioned Mosby, so many rabbit holes on him.
Yeah.
Talk about all that stuff.
Well, that's actually what we talked about. One of our next episodes being is more like kind of like a deeper dive on like what happened in Fairfax or what happened in Warrenton and all that, like looking closer at those battles.
Yeah. No, there's no question about that. And it's great to be able to kind of get out of the Gettysburg mentality to do that, because as much as Gettysburg is what it is, there's so much more that goes into it.
Yeah.
And look, we said before, we love Gettysburg. There's so much that goes into Gettysburg, but again, I think, for people who, if you're a high school teacher, for example, and you have a curriculum that actually includes the Civil War, which probably not doesn't, you get Fort Sumter, you get Gettysburg, and you got Appomattox. That's your big three. But again, there's so many things that go into it. If you look at an NFL season, everyone thinks about the Super Bowl, right? But there are so many big games along the way that affect that Super Bowl finalist. You beat a team in week 8, that gets you home field advantage because you beat the team that's going against you. That leads to that. You have to look at those. And I think to understand the whole thing, you have to look at both sides of it, but how every battle was created by smaller skirmishes and tremblers and things like that. That's what's neat about it,
MJ mentions Hancock's 200th birthday is February 14th. So there's an episode idea.
That's right. He was born on Valentine's Day.
Yeah. And that's when Sherman died.
He does, yeah. No, Hancock's one we actually haven't done a lot of stuff. We've talked about him we've talked about him in Antietam, obviously Gettysburg, things like that. We talked about him at a whole bunch of different ones we talked about, but he doesn't come up as a focus. So we'll talk about him.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. Thank you, Jay.
Imagine how much fun I have with that meme.
Oh. I like your McDonald's bag one where he's on the statue holding the McDonald's bag.
MJ loves that one, by the way.
I'm gonna get RKO to that.
I love that meme.
The statue is the McDonald's bag.
But look at him like a Spotsylvania. I mean, that's an interesting moment. That's one where he, it's not the greatest moment, but it's not really his fault. And that's the thing too, is when, it's not, he has to march through those woods at night, and poor Barlow, he's going to be kind of thrown into that, and has to make that march in the middle of the night. It's tough. It's so easy. It's so easy for people to look back 150 years later, whatever it is, 160 years later, and sit there and go, well, he should have done this. He should have done that.
It's like, well, were you there? Like, we don't know.
That's why you gotta read the Abner Small diary, the Road to Richmond, because it gives you the best look at real time what they saw in battle is that. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I like. That I definitely do.
MJ said, "Get the Ouija board ready." That was a fun episode with her, with Cush Major. We had MJ to talk about Cushman, Pauline Cushman, who she portrays. She does an awesome job with it too.
I mean, I think MJ, it's safe to say she's probably the most knowledgeable living Pauline Cushman person.
Yeah,
I bet you she is. I think she is. And so we had her on for the episode to talk about the spies of Pauline Cushman and good old Francis Wood there. It was good. We had a lot of fun with that one.
Yeah,
because in Cushman's somebody like the Bell Boyds of the world, the Sarah Slaters of the world, where they don't get enough credit or publicity because because they're not Grant or Sherman or Lee or Bragg or these guys, but there's so many people who, Van Loo, who are this fabric of a lot of what this took place, and this is just the females we're talking about, who kind of have such an impact
Sarah
on this
Edmonds,
overall
she did
war.
some spying too, but she was
Sarah
also a
Edmonds,
soldier.
absolutely. And we're not talking about the Dorothea Dix of the world. We're not talking about the Clara Bartons, the ones who risked their lives, and I know they did too, but just who put themselves in battle.
Yeah,
people don't realize, Harriet Tubman led a group in a battle in the Civil War.
Yeah,
so girls need credit too. Right. But Pauline Kushner was a fun one, because her life's fascinating. It just is, and she's somebody who should be more raised up. But MJ does a great job trying to keeping her alive.
Yeah,
and keeping her memory going. So so we'll see.
Bjorn mentions that for the New Mexico campaign, consider Megan Kate Nelson's Three-Cornered War. We gave that away. Megan was really nice and sent us a copy to give away a couple of years ago for a fundraiser we were doing.
That is correct. That's right.
Gentili mentions Antonia Ford. He was telling us about
Antonia Ford was cool. We got to sneak into her house the other day, and while people were working, and saw the pictures on the wall. That was pretty cool.
I was shocked no one came out. I could hear everybody talking, and then someone said, "Well, I better get going for the day." And we were like, "We need to leave now."
Well, I imagine people come in there to see the history stuff because they have a whole first floor of just like legitimate cool photos and prints and stuff like that. But no, again, people like her. Again, who the hell knows who Antonia Ford is? Who the hell studied? Yeah. But if you're Fairfax Station, you know who she is. If you're from that area, you know who she is. But jobs like this podcast and other podcasts are to take people like her and make them widen that circle so people know more, right? Because it's all about human stories, and learning the human stories from all these people gives you such a better view of the whole big picture. I mean, that's not rocket science, but not enough people do it. That's the problem.
Brian mentions Fort Morgan has many Civil War artifacts in their museum, plus its beautiful fort. The forts of the Civil War are my rabbit hole. Well, we did one on Wagner, right?
We did one on Battery. No, we didn't do one on Wagner.
No, we didn't. We did one on
the actual fort.
No, we did one.
We've talked about we talked about Fort Fisher.
Yeah. Yes.
We talked about like Dennis Mahan, the building of them. We talked a little bit about Fort Warren here in Boston Harbor. But no, Fort Fisher is the only one I think we've actually done a battle episode. Yeah. No, Fort Sumter we did too.
Yep. Yeah, because we did a couple episodes on kind of the secession crisis and all that, and like what happened. And
but they all play into each other.
They
all play into each other.
Yeah. Yep, they do. And that would the Sumter episodes were almost 2 years ago now, I think.
I cannot believe how long I've been doing this in a lot of ways.
We're into our fourth.
I'm an IPA girl.
So bad.
But it's great to talk about because it's amazing how it's a 4-year war. Yeah, but it's really generations leading up to it and following it. I mean, there is an endless amount of content, and you have to go down these rabbit holes. And we talk about William Carney, 54th Mass. We talk about him with I don't know why it popped in my head just now. Because of Battery Wagner. Yeah, he's the guy who the Denzel character is based on, right? He got shot in both legs, carried the flag from Fort. He was the first African American to get the Medal of Honor. When you look at the date, his act. He wasn't the first one to physically get the medal, but his act was the first. Yeah. He retires, survives the war. He's up in New Bedford here as a mailman for a handful of years. He survives the worst, and he dies in Massachusetts State House by falling in an empty elevator shaft to his death. Yeah. Could you imagine surviving that Battery Wagner? And you walk into an open door, and it's amazing when you think about some of these things. And we went to visit his gravesite not too long ago. Yeah, and it's a good thing. But it's these people. When you tell their stories, and sometimes you sit there and go, "Holy moly!" Just how the whole thing. Look at that 360 view. How it ends for some of these people. Yeah, John Lloyd mentioned the conspiracy. He's buried not far away. He was the one who got all good and right liquored up, as he told the police when they came to his house, when he had to give those shooting irons and field glasses to Mary Surratt and that whole thing. He dies by walking down the street in Washington, D.C., and a big crate of bricks falls on him and crushes him to death.
Oh, my God.
And some people think it was Mary Surratt. The ghost of Mary Surratt did that.
Probably was.
And so it's just, I don't know why. Maybe it only matters to me how some of these guys die, but for me, it's always kind of fascinating to look at. It's just weird, you know.
I think it's interesting. MJ mentions Town Line, New York, which seceded during the war, would be another episode idea. There's also the St. Albans, the raid
St.
that
Albans,
came
what we
down
wanted
from
to do
Canada.
too. That's a good one too, because we could. That's not too far away to get to from us too. So we could probably take care of that. But
that's near where Howard's buried.
Oh God, here we go. We're gonna go see Howard's grave one time, pretty soon. Then we almost went there last fall, but
I know.
Rain happened, remember?
It was summer. It was in July. We were supposed to go.
Oh yeah, but we'll get up there. We got to see Howard. I can imagine you at Howard's grave. Holy moly! He was a Christian, Jeff.
Frank mentions David Ireland survived the Atlanta campaign only to die of disease.
Yeah, he's a fascinating guy. I've studied a lot of David Ireland, but he's the first officer to actually enter the city of Atlanta after the siege, and he parks his butt at the former headquarters of John Bell Hood.
Yep.
And there's a picture taken where you can see him with the soldiers in front of his headquarters, and he dies 2 weeks later of disease, of dysentery, right? Wow. And it's sad because his body gets returned back to Binghamton, New York.
Yeah.
And his wife has expected him to come on leave. And the day that he's supposed to arrive back home, he arrives, but he's in a box and he's dead. Can you imagine that? Just like the human part of this.
Yeah.
And there's no money, so they have to raise money for his grave. And if you go visit his grave now, it's a beautiful.
It's in a cemetery that is like, it could be a beautiful cemetery. It kind of is, but it's also like
and his grave is kind of falling apart a little bit. It's cracking. And just up the hill, John Cleveland Robinson is buried, and he's got a nice grave up there. So, but yeah, a lot of these guys, when you look at them as regular people, picture them as people it just makes it even more sad, but it makes it more commendable for the things they did. Like we went down a Ringgold Gap, right, over there in Georgia.
Yeah.
And where the 137th, which was facing Claiborne's guys, and how far they got. And they said they had to, it was like walking in a sleet storm with how much fire they were getting hit at. And they got pretty close. So they finally had to get the hell out of there.
Yeah. Wasn't that where Claiborne hid the guns and said, don't say anything until...
That was freaking stupid Joe Hooker who screwed that whole thing up, because he, instead of sending all of his men together, he sends them piecemeal because he doesn't know that Claiborne's still there, and they get astroglided by friggin' Confederate artillery, and then David Ireland's infantry is going to go in, heading towards Ringgold Station, and he gets to maybe 100 yards. And it's amazing when you think of the balls that some of these guys had and where they had to go, and in fact they actually did it. Because no one there knew or even thought for a second, I'm coming out of this alive. This is it for me. Yeah. And I got to do it. I can't. I'd be a coward otherwise. I can't go back to my town if I can't do this. So they did.
Yeah. I mean, from the kind of the Confederate side of it or whatever, not really, but just from like Claiborne's side of it, like Ringgold Gap is a brilliant move on his point, that he's able to kind of defend. Like he's lucky. I mean, Hooker doesn't do great, but
he's Claiborne's in a great defensive position though.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I think so after Chattanooga and Bragg is taken off and he's heading out,
Bragg's like, Claiborne, can you save us again?
But he did. He's really the only line that didn't break in the battle at Missionary Ridge and all that. But I don't think Hooker thought they were defending it the way they did, because he's the rear guard. He's here to protect the supply trains, as long as kind of like what Tilden did.
Yeah.
In Gettysburg, just hold out for a little while till we can get out of Dodge. But it was a great defensive position. If you've been at Ringgold Gap and you see where Claiborne was, it was kind of like the movie 300, between the two gaps, the road going right between the two mountains, and he loads them with artillery, and he waits till the last possible minute to unleash them. And because Hooker's Hooker, if he sent all his men through, they probably would have got through, but he sends them piecemeal.
Yeah.
And then at that point, once the shooting starts, they're all hunkered by the railroad tracks and like, screw this is friggin' stupid.
Yeah.
And except Ireland went in.
Yeah. And then Claiborne that night lights all those fires to make it like look like there's more men there, and then he's like gone the next day when they realized they'd been like completely duped by him, because he makes it look like there's
that was Claiborne's probably his best moment. I mean, he was.
Yeah. I mean, it's not necessarily about what you do in the battle; it's also about what you do after to kind of.
And we did a Claiborne episode, I remember correctly, right? Did we?
We've never done an episode on Patrick Cleburne.
We didn't?
No.
I could have sworn we just really.
No, we had Simmons on to talk about his book. We did like we've done like Ringgold Gap and all that. I do want to do an episode on Cleburne. I think that would be great. Tammy mentions Rufus Dawes was sure he would not make it through the wilderness. Ryan mentions, I'm researching Hooker in the West. I'm finding new reasons to hate on Howard.
What?
Oh, Ryan says he's like researching Hooker in the West and finding new reasons to hate on Howard.
Oh, Howard, well, I mean, you can hate on Howard in the East, but the West is tough. But Hooker, I mean, he is
Hooker just hate, like, he's like, who can I blame for Chancellorsville?
Well, you mentioned someone mentioned Rufus Dawes. He's an interesting guy because he's the first documented case of PTSD in American military history, theoretically anyway. Mm-hmm. And he shows he's a guy very much like a lot of these guys we talked about, where he rose his men, his own regiment. They show up at Camp Randall in Wisconsin, the site where the Wisconsin Badgers football team plays, right? And they're laughing at them. They don't know how to drill. They're middle of nowhere. But he rallies these guys, and he finally sees battle at Groveton, Second Manassas. And that's where they see that elephant for the first time, Second Wisconsin, guys like that, right? And then from there, they're involved with obviously the railroad cut at Gettysburg is their famous thing. There are so many things that went into. And so it's going through the Wilderness, 1864. But by the time he gets to Wilderness, you can see that cheese falling off the cracker a little bit with him. Like and you read in his diary, the bravado he had.
We did an episode on him.
We did at the beginning versus the end, and he was shook at the end. He really was.
Like he was having that survivor's guilt.
Well, he was, speaking of Hooker, he was a big Hooker guy. Yeah. Loved himself some Joe Hooker, and he did not like Meade. And he has that interesting perspective where when Meade rode the line the first time when he took command in late in June of 63 before Gettysburg, Hooker had Meade had that hat, that big floppy hat he wears in the pictures. And when he rode by his men, he says he pulled his hat down over his eyes so they couldn't see him, he couldn't see him. Like he was afraid, he couldn't face his men for whatever reason. And he says, and so it's just one of those interesting soldier perspectives. But I think a lot of the guys didn't like Meade because he wasn't Hooker. They loved Hooker. They just did. They loved McClellan. They loved Hooker.
Yeah. I mean, Hooker, I think, was very extroverted, very like, he was the exact opposite. Meade didn't really champion for himself. He was a quieter guy. He was next to Grant, one of the greatest Army commanders to come out of the Civil War. Very talented, but he took the Army that McClellan made and that Hooker made better, and he won the Battle of Gettysburg with it.
Somewhere.
Brian said, by the way, you guys made me finally try an IPA, and I actually really enjoy them.
Oh, God. God, we're contributing to a delinquency of a Brian. Fantastic. Well, welcome aboard.
He's the one that lives down in Alabama, and he likes visiting the forts. He finally tried an IPA because of us.
Oh, yeah. Good luck with that. You go to a bar with two people and have 3 drinks, it'll cost you $100.
Now, Brian, you need to join Untapped.
Untapped is a good thing. There's no question.
Great way to keep track of yours. Bjorn mentions Rufus Dawes' book, Service with the 6th Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. He thinks it's on par with Abner Small. And he also mentions the fact that Rufus survived the war was what broke him psychologically.
I think so, because I think you have that
survivor's guilt.
Survivor's guilt. Why did he talks about going across that field, that 300-yard field between the Chambersburg Pike and the railroad cut. And ironically, they lost 300 guys in 300 yards, right? And he talks about him surviving and others not. And Eric Schleinling's book, right? We talked about a lot. Yeah. It's a historical fiction, but it's probably the most vivid description of that assault by the 6th Wisconsin on the railroad cut.
Black Iron Mercy.
Black Iron Mercy.
It is so good.
Because it's fiction. It's like Killer Angels, but his description of that is real history.
Yeah.
And he talks about...
the book will make you angry because he gets rid of certain characters and you're like, why?
Some of the most vicious fighting in any war I mean, people talk about Pickett's charge, but when you want to talk about the big, really ground zero of Civil War combat at Gettysburg, you're going to talk railroad cut. You've got to talk. You have to talk Wheatfield, and you have to talk. Really, it's a smaller scale, but that 20th Indiana versus the 3rd Arkansas, right down there. Against Van Manning against Wheeler, that is absolute ground zero of a Civil War combat. And you can, because of the time of year, if you're in the area, you can walk behind the 20th Indiana down that hill, and you can see that cauldron. But that rock where they put Wheeler's body and he got shot in the temple and killed instantly, they put his body on that rock, and you can see the and you can see that same rock. Same with Van Hornellis. We've been talking about him a lot today for some reason. The actual location of his statue that I was talking about, he's standing like this, was where the soldiers placed his body after the battle. So that rock is literally covered in his blood. They put the statue on. And that's what's cool about some of these locations, some of these monuments.
Yep. E. Houston just said, I don't know about the IPA thing. I might have to go back to addressing Gettysburg. Just kidding.
I think Veronica's a big IPA fan, so I know she's not there anymore, but we have a little bit of AG representation with the IPA thing. But seriously though, I'm still a Yuengling guy. I am.
Yeah. Oh, Frank said he finished Black Iron Mercy. Really liked it. I put the book just in the chat. If people want to check out Black Iron Mercy, it's a great historical novel.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, there's a few of them. Cain at Gettysburg, obviously Killer Angels, Black Iron Mercy. If you haven't read that book, and you're into the Iron Brigade,
oh my God, it is so, like, we had Eric on, and he's a firefighter, and he's such a down to earth, nice guy. He's got he's married in Wisconsin. He's got kids. He's got grandkids. He's got cats. And we were like, how did you write this? He's like, I just did. He's
a history nerd like a lot of us, and he just decided, I'm gonna write a book about some characters, fictional characters and real characters, based on the soldier diaries. So, and the ironic thing about it is, unlike Killer Angels, where you throw in the Buster Kilrains of the world and some of these other ones, is he talks about this. He has a very vivid description of the west of the cornfield in Antietam.
Oh yeah,
and then Gettysburg, and it's the point where you're reading it and you're really there. He puts you in the moment, and it's not just him talking about random stuff. It's all based on real people and real regiments where they were at the real time. So it's got real history to it.
And then some of the stuff he does, like that one character that dies, I was like, why did you?
Oh yeah, don't spoil.
And how you find out about it. I was just going to say, getting back to Rufus Dawes and the survivor's guilt and the PTSD. I was going to say, like, watching Rescue Me, which is a show about some firefighters in New York. Dennis Leary wrote it, stars in an amazing show. Dennis Leary's character, Tommy Gavin, actually ends up with survivor's guilt, and he just randomly breaks down and cries. And they portray it so well. And I've been thinking as we're watching that, I'm like, is this what happened to Rufus Dawes and these other guys? They would just Dawes must have just randomly broke down and cried, because that's what happens with it.
Well, they say Grant broke down and cried after Cold Harbor. I mean, these are humans we're talking about. We're not talking about fembots here, Mary. Okay, this is real people we're talking about here. So it's the mental tread on the tire everybody has. I mean, there is only so much shit a human can take in their own personal lives. And when you start these Book of Job moments where all these things are happening left, right, left, I mean, there's only so much you can take psychologically. But that's why you got to remember that you've survived everything, every bad thing that's ever happened to you, you've survived it. So that's what you always keep in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
But these people in real time, I mean, you look at the Taylor brothers in First Wisconsin, Henry Isaac. You talk about being killed, against Camus Wilcox's guys and burying their bodies like they're burying a bag of potatoes. Isaac was killed around dusk. I buried his body. This is his brother we're talking about. So matter of fact. It's what these poor guys went through in real time. And thank God a lot of them wrote the diaries, because we can read about it and you can sort of feel their pain and feel their emotions and how they felt. But it's just hard. Pete Carmichael, he writes a lot of his books about
Yeah, the War for the Common Soldier by
common
Pete
soldier
Carmichael is a
about, and
really amazing book.
it's several stories of just human endurance and how much can you take. Carol Reardon, she's the queen of the miserable story, right? She knows all these great soldier stories, but they're so painful to hear because they're all stories of holding their son's hand while they died in the battlefield, and how what they had to deal with. And you can have your Lee and Meade and all that stuff, but when you talk about burying your brother on the battlefield,
yeah,
right, and hoping that the cartridge box with his name on it holds so they can find his body so he can go back to his mother. It's sad. It just is.
Oh yeah, and
is.
you think about somebody like, Cisco mentions the number of mental asylums in the U.S. exploded after the Civil War, and at that time they weren't really. I mean, Rufus Dawes is the first diagnosed case of PTSD, I think, but you think of these other guys that kind of, you wonder, some of these generals, like you look at somebody like Rosecrans during Chickamauga, how he's not the Rosecrans that was at Stones River. He's definitely not the Rosecrans that was that designed that Tullahoma campaign.
I'm sorry, when you see your friend have his garage, have his head blown off clean right next to you, you get your brains all over
you're not going to be the same.
You're not going to be the same. You're not going to be the
same.
And
I think that's why Rescue Me, like, I think often, like, wow, I think the reason that show was, I mean, you talk to anybody, they loved it, but it's looking at how the firefighters kind of have to get back to normal after such a horrific thing. I wonder if some of the cases, like with Civil War soldiers, were similar, how they have to kind of just, they deal with it in different ways. And Rosecrans, I mean, Brian mentions he's a Yuengling fan as well.
Yuengling's the absolute best, you know what I mean? But I told before, I did that presentation for my Freemason Lodge a few weeks ago. And if you read some of the books, like The Better Angels of Their Nature, right, and you read some of the stories of just how they helped each other out, when Barksdale was shot, and he's mentioned Barksdale a while ago, the story pops in my head. Some of the Northern Masons, his men, his Mississippi guys left him, and some of his Masonic people recognize his buttons. And there's a story they talk about where he asked, basically, am I wounded? Am I morally wounded? And he gave him a canteen, and he drank the water, and water started pouring out of his chest.
Oh.
And just like, I don't think this isn't going to end well for him. And they bring him back. He spends the last night of his life at that Hubblebar farm.
Yeah.
Telling off everyone who's in the North. I mean, he held on to his fire till the very end, talking about the cause and this, and swearing at every Union soldier till he finally died. But I mean, those human stories, those interactions are what makes this war fascinating. Because unlike the Revolutionary War, there's not a lot of diaries talking about it. There really isn't. It's the first war with photography. It's what resonates with a lot of people. But there's so many stories that talk about it, good, bad, and indifferent, but they have to be studied. They have to be.
Bjorn's taken off for the day. Thank you, Bjorn. Great day.
Yeah, we should jump up too. It's almost 12.
Yep.
I think there's football today.
You said at 4.
Yeah, I think Steelers play Ravens today. God, who do I root for in that one? That's an ankle twist and groin pull game for me.
So but don't have to watch it.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. We've got to watch this football. I got to watch it. But all right, so we got some stuff coming up. So we're going to jump off. So it's almost 12. So I appreciate everybody jumping on.
Brian actually has a quick question before we jump off. For a newbie to the Civil War, what books would you recommend for my beginner self?
That's a tough one.
Battle Cry of Freedom, but
Freedom,
I think you got that
McPherson is probably the best one. But what I would suggest you do is whatever your favorite battlefield is, right? Whatever one it is, learn about that one and then kind of expand out, right? Because McPherson's book is good, but it talks about everything. But if like for me, Gettysburg resonated with me, so I wanted to learn as much as I could about Gettysburg, and then I wanted to learn about how they got there and where they went, and then how it expanded out, right? So I would suggest find your favorite battlefield, right? And then learn as much as you can about it, about the people who fought there, and then see where else they fought and see what other battles resonate with you. And before you know it, you're going to know a bunch of it. But I mean, I'll tell you though, once it gets in your blood, it never lets you go. So be careful what you wish for.
Or if you have a general or colonel or whoever that you're really interested in, like see if there's a biography about them and go from there as well.
Yeah.
But definitely I would echo what Darren said with the whole, like, find your battle. If you have a battle you're interested in, look at the books for that and kind of just start reading about it. And like Darren said, kind of just expand from there. What other battles tie into it? Or if you're like, if you kind of a person resonates with you, where did they fight? For me, it was like it started with Gettysburg, but then it moved to Chickamauga. And then from there it was Chattanooga. And,
Right.
Obviously Vicksburg is before that. But then I started studying the people that fought there, like Patrick Cleburne, like Oliver Otis Howard, Rosecrans is there.
Right.
But then for Gettysburg, for me, it was like, General Meade. It's very interesting. All that.
But, if no specific battlefield comes, I would say McPherson's book is probably a good place to start.
Yeah. And then Grant's memoirs.
Yeah, Grant's memoirs. But again, if you find what battlefield, what battle you like, and study that one. And because every battlefield, it just goes down a rabbit hole. So, yeah. All right. So why don't we jump off? We got stuff to do today, Mary. Many things to do. So we'll jump off. So everybody have a great week. I'm sure we'll do this again next week, and then we'll post our next episode here shortly. We're going to try to record next week or so. We got some ideas we're going to do. So, any final words from you, Fincher, before we jump off on this first Saturday of January?
So happy New Year to everyone, and thank you for all your support as we go into, I guess it's our fourth, 3 years old now. We're going theoretically year 4. Thank you to welcome to the new people who are on here today. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you'll come back and all that. And to everyone who's been on here before, thank you for hanging out with us for these almost 2 hours that we do this for.
Yeah, it's always a lot of fun, and definitely we appreciate that. So, all right, so off we go. Have a great, if you are in the East Coast today, take it slow. A lot of snow's coming. Snowmageddon is hitting again. We're going to get it tomorrow, so take it slow. It's a great weekend, Mary, to stay inside and drink, or drink
make
and
chili.
Read. Either one, or make chili. I'll find something to do.
I'm gonna make chili.
I'm going to sit in the snow at a football game tomorrow, watching a meeting.
And I'm going to stay home and finish my Thomas Jefferson biography.
Yeah, might be Belichick's last game, so I got to go tomorrow. So, all right, so off we go, guys. Have a great rest of the weekend. We'll talk to you all on the other side.
Bye, guys.
Peace out.